and deliver real results for everyday Americans. Throughout this Congress, we have repeatedly done just that. Same period of time, we've made clear that we will push back against MAGA extremism whenever necessary. We will push back against MAGA extremism with respect to their efforts to criminalize abortion care. House Democrats will always defend a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions, and that includes birth control and IVF. House Democrats will push back against Republican extremism when it comes to their efforts to end Social Security and Medicare as we know it. We believe in protecting and strengthening Social Security and Medicare. House Democrats will continue to push back against the extreme MAGA Republican effort to decimate the progress that we made in combating the climate crisis through the Inflation Reduction Act. But we are ready, we are willing, we are able at all times to find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues. We are prepared to do that with respect to reaching a spending agreement under the same terms that were agreed upon in connection with the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act. That means a top line spending number of 1681, not a penny less. We are prepared to move forward with an enlightened farm bill, but that, of course, requires extreme MAGA Republicans to walk away from their effort to cut nutritional assistance for children and veterans by $30 billion, the largest proposed cut in 3 decades. We are prepared to find common ground in a bipartisan way with respect to the National Defense Authorization Act. But that will require extreme MAGA Republicans to walk away from any effort that they may try to inject into what is now a bipartisan agreement that came out of the Armed Services Committee by a vote of 57-1 and should be kept bipartisan. And if that in fact is the case, we can move on this legislation in a bipartisan way and get it out of the House in the next week or two. Our concern is that the extreme MAGA Republicans may try to jam their reckless right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people, criminalize abortion care, or restrict the ability of women in uniform to make their own reproductive health care decisions. If they go down that road again, that will be a futile exercise when it comes to actually a legislative result. So there's some items that are in front of us that we are prepared to work through in partnership with our Republican colleagues, but it requires traditional Republicans to walk away from the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world and get serious about doing the business of the American people. Questions?
We talked to a bunch of Democrats since the executive order was announced, and it seems to be somewhat divisive. I mean, we see some progressives saying this was the wrong thing to do. Some of your more moderate members praising it. What's your sense of how the caucus is reacting and what the consequences might be?
We have a broken immigration system and clear challenges at the border. President Biden has taken decisive action to try in a good faith manner to address the challenges at the border in a manner consistent with our country's heritage as a nation anchored in the rule of law. At the same time, there is broad consensus within the caucus that it will be important for additional steps to be taken, preferably through legislation that addresses issues connected to dreamers, addresses issues connected to farm workers and addresses issues connected to protecting immigrant families. Second row.
You're going to have a vote later today on the ICC sanctioning legislation. Both the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the ranking member, or one of your members, Gregory Meese, has talked about how there was a bipartisan agreement that you guys had up until last week, and the White House rejected that. What are your thoughts on that, and is there a path forward to do something bipartisan that would actually pass?
I do not think that Ranking Member Meeks has indicated there was an actual bipartisan agreement. There were certainly bipartisan conversations that were serious in nature to try to get to a place where, with one voice, Democrats and Republicans can confront what most of us believe was a wrong-headed decision by the ICC with respect to the state of Israel. And there's still an opportunity to try to find bipartisan common ground and actually legislate, as opposed to moving a partisan bill through the House that we all know is dead on arrival in the United States Senate. Senator Cardin, who's a well-respected voice and champion of the special relationship between the United States and Israel, has legislation with respect to the ICC that I think could draw bipartisan support. That's one of several options that we can continue to pursue. We are ready to engage in a continued bipartisan exploration of how to address what many of us believe is a runaway ICC in a manner consistent with the views of the Biden administration that also protect our efforts at diplomacy throughout the world, particularly with our Western allies in Europe.
Would that include sanctions? Would you support a bill that would include sanctions?
The version that will be before the House of Representatives is not a version that I can support.
Speaker Mike Johnson laid out his plan to go after the DOJ, what he calls weaponization of the DOJ against President Trump, and he wants to use everything from oversight to appropriations to even legislative bills to go after the DOJ. Your thoughts on that, and should the Speaker be playing that role for Congress as well?
Well, the Speaker has a role to play with respect to his extreme MAGA Republican conference. Let me speak to the general issue as it relates to the effort to create a political advantage for the extreme MAGA Republicans by trying to raise this issue of so-called weaponization. They have a select committee on weaponization. It has been a complete and spectacular failure. And so there's no reason for any of us on the Democratic side to believe that, based on the fact that the former president, who went through a judicial process just like any other American, and at the end of that process, which lasted for 5 weeks, you had 12 jurors come to a unanimous conclusion that the former president was guilty of 34 felonies, and that somehow is indication of weaponization. When that was a state prosecution that had nothing to do with President Biden or the Department of Justice. The American people understand that we need more common sense and less chaos in Washington, D.C. House Democrats are the common sense caucus. House Republicans are the chaos caucus. President Joe Biden is a common sense leader. Donald Trump is a chaos agent. Anything that Donald Trump touches turns into chaos. 4 years of chaos in Washington, D.C., with Donald Trump as president. A lifetime of chaos in New York City with Donald Trump as a resident. Atlantic City turned into chaos. Who can bankrupt a casino? I thought the house always wins. Chaos in Atlantic City. Chaos on the Supreme Court. Donald Trump makes 3 appointments, and Roe v. Wade falls after 49 years. A woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions, gone. Donald Trump touches the Supreme Court, nothing but chaos. And of course, when it comes to Trump University, chaos. Hardworking Americans robbed of their hard-earned money. Joe Biden is a common sense leader. Donald Trump is a chaos agent. Everything he touches results in chaos. So as far as I can tell, that's the big lesson that comes out of the jury's decision to find Donald Trump guilty on 34 felony counts. The side is pretty quiet here. I usually try to alternate. Okay, all right.
Back to Israel for a moment, Mr. Leader. Could you just describe the process between the 4 congressional leaders and how you arrived at an invitation to Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Well, as you understand, I'm sure, that any invitation to a foreign leader emanates as a result of an agreement between the Speaker of the House and the majority in the House, and the Senate Majority Leader and the majority in the Senate. And so that process took place in the context of the invitation to the head of state of the state of Israel, a Democratic ally. And that process was consistent with everything that took place throughout the 118th Congress in prior instances related to the head of state for India, the head of state for Japan, and the head of state for South Korea. In all of those instances, once there was agreement between the House majority and the Senate majority, the 2 minority leaders signed on to that letter of invitation, and that's the process that unfolded in this particular instance.
What's going on with the date? Did you agree to the June 13th date that was announced?
Senator Schumer and I had nothing to do with the June 13th date. It was news to us, and we found out the same way that everyone in this room found out. And by the way, as someone who represents a broad cross-section of the Jewish community in Brooklyn, and I'm very proud of that fact, I would have known better than to extend an invitation on a Jewish holiday to the Prime Minister of the State of Israel. Yeah. First row.
Okay. On the President Biden's executive order for today, should the president have acted sooner? Taken this action sooner with what we've been seeing on the border? Why did it need to wait until now?
Seems to me that President Biden wanted to give the legislative process every opportunity to succeed or fall, and give the Republicans in the House and in the Senate the benefit of the doubt. They have repeatedly claimed, and in fact held up critical aid to our Democratic ally in Ukraine, which was facing an existential threat as a result of Russian aggression, and held that aid up for months because extreme MAGA Republicans claimed that there was an urgent challenge that we needed to address at the border, and then they walked away from their own bipartisan legislative resolution that would have helped to address the challenges at the border. President Biden has given them every opportunity to try to legislate with us on this issue. Democrats recognize across the spectrum that we have a broken immigration system and that we have challenges at the border. And we need a border that is strong, it is safe, that is secure, and that is also humane. And so I think it seems to me that the Biden administration finally got to a point where they recognized that the extreme MAGA Republicans have zero interest in addressing the challenges at the border and solving the issue legislatively because the extreme MAGA Republicans want to try to weaponize the issue politically. That's the weaponization party, by the way. This is the group, the extreme MAGA Republicans, who have weaponized the Supreme Court against the women of America when it comes to taking away a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. And have taken that decision, weaponized it, and are now throughout the country, including in every single state in the Deep South, criminalized abortion care as part of their march toward a nationwide ban.
Back to the Prime Minister's address, several Democrats have said they will boycott the speech. Do you think that's appropriate?
Like every single joint address to Congress, I plan to attend and participate. That relates to every single joint address that has taken place during the 118th Congress and at every moment where I've been a member of House Democratic leadership. But at the same time, all of us recognize that every individual member has to make that decision to participate on their own based on what they believe is consistent with the district that they represent.
New York question for you. We just saw former Representative Mondaire Jones endorse against Jamal Bowman in that primary. I know you've endorsed Bowman. How are you planning to help Jamal Bowman in the upcoming June primary? What steps are you taking to help him win re-election?
Well, it hasn't changed the endorsement that has been made by the entirety of House Democratic leadership, and we're in ongoing conversations with the Bowman campaign as it relates to their strategy over the next few weeks. Right? I think, okay, I'm sorry.
Back to the Democrats who are going to be potentially boycotting a visit from Prime Minister Netanyahu. Do you have an issue with them using words like war criminal to describe the Prime Minister?
My views of the special relationship between the United States and Israel have been clear, and my views as it relates to what needs to happen moving forward to bring about a just and lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinian people are clear, which involves decisively defeating Hamas, bringing all the hostages home, surging humanitarian assistance into Gaza immediately and consistently, and having a comprehensive plan to reconstruct Gaza and surge economic development assistance into the West Bank as part of an effort to get to a better place for everyone in the region, centered around the relationship between Israel and the Palestinian people. Last two questions.
Back to New York, the White House released a memo this morning with the executive order saying that Tom Suozzi's campaign it suggested as if it was a template for immigration politics as it pertains to Democratic members, Democratic incumbents running this year. Do you agree with that assessment? Chair Andy Costa of the New Dem said that it's something that purple districts can run on. Do you agree that Tom Suozzi's playbook, the way that he handled immigration in his campaign, can be something that Democrats can turn to as they campaign on this tough issue?
I have not seen that specific memo, but I've been very clear in my public observations that Tom Suozzi is a get stuff done kind of member who ran on a clear vision for fixing the problems that the American people are confronting, including decisively addressing the challenges at the border. Tom Suozzi won decisively in a district that had experienced a string of Republican successes. And so that decisive victory and the manner in which he chose to engage and lean into trying to find a bipartisan path forward with respect to fixing our broken immigration system and doing it in a manner consistent with our values as a nation of immigrants, which was an important part of how Tom Suozzi addressed the issue. Having come from an immigrant family himself, which he leaned into repeatedly, that certainly provides an enlightened playbook for how we should not simply conduct ourselves responsibly on the campaign trail, but more importantly, try to actually solve the problem as policymakers here in the United States Congress. Last question, thank you.
Are you concerned that the EO too drastically changes the asylum process and that the U.S. could start sending back people who actually, have a reason to come here seeking asylum?
I haven't had a full opportunity to look at the particulars in that regard or hear from immigration experts with respect to how they think it could impact the asylum process, though, of course, the asylum application process is an important part of who we are as Americans, as a nation anchored in both the rule of law and as a nation of immigrants. And I think as we evaluate what the legislative opportunities will be moving forward, those are two values that we should continue to hold close to as part of our effort to reach a bipartisan agreement at some point when our traditional Republicans decide to stop politicizing the issue and join with us to solve the issue for the American people. Thank you, everyone.